The storm hit harder as Thomas pulled into the driveway, fat raindrops pelting the windshield, the rhythmic thud of the wipers masking the pounding in his chest. He had told himself he wouldn't come back here, not now, not like this. But something had shifted in the pit of his stomach since the hospice nurse left that message. "There's something you need to know, Mr. Reed. It's unusual." She hadn't said more. She didn't need to. Sarah was gone. That much he knew. What he didn't know was what had suddenly demanded his presence, 3 days after her death, in the house they once called home. He killed the engine and stepped out, barely noticing the cold water soaking his collar. The house loomed in front of him, all too familiar yet foreign now. Sarah's death had changed its essence. It didn't feel like home. It felt like something else. Haunted, maybe. He unlocked the front door and stepped inside, half expecting to hear her soft voice calling his name or smell her perfume floating through the air. But there was only silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Everything was exactly as he remembered. Her shawl draped neatly over the back of the armchair. The crystal bowl on the mantel filled with the hard strawberry candies she liked but never finished. The framed wedding photo still sitting on the hallway table, untouched. And then his eyes landed on it, the envelope. It sat on the kitchen table, plain white, angled carefully like someone had placed it there with thought. His name was written in her distinct handwriting. Thomas. That's all. No greeting. No emotion. Just his name. He stared at it for a long moment before walking over. His hands hesitated inches from the paper. Picking it up felt final. Like the closing of something sacred. He took a breath and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice. Her writing was weaker than he remembered, faint strokes, shaky at the ends. "If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer in pain. You made your choice, Thomas, and now I've made mine. Check the safe. The code hasn't changed." That was it. No goodbye. No, "I forgive you." Just a quiet instruction. A quiet threat? He wasn't sure. The safe. He hadn't thought about it in years. It was in the study, tucked behind a false panel in the bookshelf. They had used it mostly for passports, insurance documents, birth certificates, nothing dramatic. But Sarah's words rang differently now. She hadn't said, "Get the will," or "Find the papers." She said, "I've made my choice." Thomas's mouth felt dry as he walked down the hall, past the pictures of holidays and family trips, moments now tainted by absence and regret. He reached the study, pushed aside the panel, and found the safe, just as she'd left it. The code. Of course he remembered it. Her birthday. He punched it in. Click. The door creaked open. At first, it seemed like nothing had changed. There were the documents, the insurance folder, the deed to the house. But then he saw the folder at the back. Thick. Black. No label. He pulled it out. Inside was a stack of papers, some photos, and a flash drive. And a note. For the truth. Let's see if you loved the lie more than you hated me. His knees weakened. He sat on the edge of the leather chair, staring at the contents like they were poisoned. He flipped open the folder. The first photo made his stomach twist. It was Marissa, his lover. Only, it wasn't taken recently. It was from 5 years ago. Before he and Marissa had ever started. In the picture, she was standing outside an unfamiliar building, talking to a man Thomas didn't recognize. The next few photos showed them together, different angles, different dates. One even had Marissa with Sarah. Thomas's heart thundered. What the hell is this? The documents were worse. Copies of messages, emails, some between Marissa and someone named Daniel. Others between Sarah and a private investigator. There were transcripts. Phone calls. Voicemails. And at the bottom, a handwritten journal entry from Sarah. He thinks she's a stranger. But she's been in our lives for far longer than he realizes. Watching, waiting. I wonder if he'll ever know the truth. I wonder if it'll break him the way he broke me. Thomas dropped the paper. The room spun. How long had Sarah known? He stood, pacing. His head ached, memories crashing into each other, things that never made sense suddenly lining up in eerie patterns. Marissa always knew things about his schedule before he told her. She'd once mentioned a story Sarah told years ago. He had brushed it off at the time. He picked up the flash drive, shoved it into his laptop. A folder popped up, "Play me first." It was a video. Sarah sat on the edge of her hospice bed, frail but composed. She looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this, it means I'm dead. I didn't want to leave this earth without telling my story. Not the story you told yourself about me, or the one you used to justify your choices. But the real one. I knew about Marissa long before you confessed. I also knew she wasn't who she claimed to be. That's because she used to be in my life, and I never told you." She paused, her breath shallow. "Thomas, I know what you did. But this isn't just about betrayal. It's about consequences. You made your choice. And so did I. Let's see if you can live with mine." The video cut off. Thomas sat frozen. He couldn't breathe. What did she mean? Was Marissa someone from Sarah's past? How deep did this go? And then it hit him. The will. The nurse had mentioned it. Something about it being unconventional. He grabbed his coat and rushed out of the house, not caring about the rain anymore. He needed answers. Thomas Reed had faced many moments of uncertainty in his life, career failures, his father's death, the slow decay of his marriage. But none had struck him quite like this. He stared at the note in his hand again. Everything goes to her. You know who. She earned it. His fingers tightened around the paper, crumpling the edges as if pressure alone could force it to make sense. He didn't know who. That was the point. The lawyer, Mr. Holloway, sat silently across the desk, his hands folded patiently, eyes sympathetic but detached, the kind of look you only get from someone who deals in death and inheritance regularly. I don't understand," Thomas muttered finally. "There must be a name. A full legal recipient. This doesn't make any sense." Mr. Holloway nodded. "That's why I wanted to meet with you personally." He pulled a second envelope from the drawer. She left very detailed instructions. That one, he nodded at the note in Thomas's hand, was meant to shake you. This one is meant to explain, at least a little. Thomas opened the second envelope with less rage and more hesitation. Inside was a letter, typed this time. Still Sarah's words, though. Still her voice, cool and sharp, even from beyond the grave. Thomas. By now you've discovered that I changed my will. I'm sure that came as a surprise, especially since we agreed years ago everything would be simple when the time came. But nothing has been simple for a long time, has it? You think I didn't know about Marissa. But I did. You think she was some secret you pulled out from behind your back like a magician's trick. But she's not who you think she is. She never was. You'll find answers in the safety deposit box at St. Clair's Bank. Box number 18. The key is inside the envelope taped under the drawer of your desk. You'll need ID. Use your name. They'll know you're coming. And Thomas, before you open it, ask yourself something. Who was she before she became yours? Goodbye. Sarah. Thomas folded the letter slowly, his heart pounding. He didn't move right away. Just stared out the window of the law office into the rain-soaked city, trying to remember how to breathe. His first instinct was to call Marissa. She had texted him earlier that morning. Thinking of you. Hope today isn't too hard. Dinner tonight? How could she be so calm? So normal? He shoved the thought aside. He left the office without another word. Mr. Holloway didn't try to stop him. The drive to St. Clair's Bank took 20 minutes. The rain had turned into a misty drizzle, the kind that seemed to seep through your skin and settle in your bones. Thomas parked, walked in, and presented his ID at the front desk. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with a tired smile, nodded and led him into a private vault room. Box 18 sat quietly in the wall, unremarkable. She handed him the box and stepped outside. Thomas sat down, his hands shaking as he inserted the key. It clicked open. Inside was a small stack of documents, a slim black journal with a broken elastic strap, and a manila envelope with a note stuck to the front. Read the journal first. He obeyed. The journal wasn't long. Less than 50 pages. The handwriting wasn't Sarah's. It was Marissa's. Journal entry, March 7th. I saw her today. I didn't think it would feel like this. After everything, I thought maybe I'd feel rage or satisfaction. But mostly I felt small. Like a child who wandered too close to something sacred. Sarah looked right through me. Like she knew. Like she always knew. I shouldn't have come back to this town. But the past never lets go, does it? You can bury it, run from it, change your name. But it waits. Sarah taught me that. Journal entry, April 2nd. I met him. Thomas. I didn't mean for it to happen, not at first. But it's strange how pain makes you recognize pain in others. He was drowning. I saw it in his eyes the moment he spoke to me. Does that make me cruel? That I saw it, and still moved closer? Journal entry, April 19th. Sarah asked me to stay away. She didn't threaten me. She didn't cry. She just asked me like she already knew the answer. But I didn't listen. I couldn't. I'd spent too many years surviving. Now I wanted to live. And that meant him. By the 5th page, Thomas couldn't sit still. He stood up, pacing the small room. What is this? He flipped to the last entry, dated just 2 weeks before Sarah's death. Final entry, 3 weeks ago. She forgave me. After all this time. She said she wasn't angry anymore. Said the pain was bigger than the betrayal. She told me something I wasn't ready to hear. That she always knew who I was. That she chose me. And that everything, was hers to give or take. I asked her why. Why do this? Why let me stay in his life? She said, because I want him to know what it feels like to not know who someone really is. The way I didn't know with you, until it was too late. Thomas sat down slowly. The box was still open in front of him. He opened the manila envelope. Inside were adoption papers. A photo. A birth certificate. His heart stopped. Marissa's real name wasn't Marissa. It was Melissa Jameson. And 23 years ago, Sarah Reed had been her foster mother. Back then, before Thomas had ever met Sarah, she had taken in a troubled 16-year-old girl who had been moved from home to home, abandoned by her own mother, caught stealing, lying, breaking things that couldn't be fixed. A girl named Melissa. According to the file, she had disappeared one night. Ran away. Sarah had reported it. Cried for her. Waited. Hoped. And then, Marissa, had returned. Years later. With a new name. A new story. And an old wound to settle. Thomas dropped the papers. His mouth was dry. The room spun slightly. He had been manipulated. He thought he'd found love, passion, escape from a failing marriage. But he'd walked right into a web. Had Marissa planned this? Had she come back to hurt Sarah? Had she used him? His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text. Marissa, still on for dinner? I made your favorite. The air outside Marissa's apartment was thick with dampness and dread. Thomas stood motionless, peering through the window as the photograph on the wall burned itself into his mind. There was no mistaking him now. The man standing beside Marissa, arm loosely around her shoulder, a subtle smile on his face, was none other than Michael Wren, Sarah's estranged half-brother. A man Sarah had never spoken about in detail. A man she once referred to, almost in passing, as the reason I stopped trusting people. Thomas stared harder, his breath fogging up the cold glass. How long had this been going on? Was this the real reason Marissa had entered his life? He stepped back, heart pounding. This wasn't an affair anymore. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a setup. And the woman he thought he had loved, she had known him, studied him, maybe even used him, for reasons that were starting to look far bigger than just love or revenge. His phone buzzed again. Marissa, I just opened a bottle of wine. Hurry or it'll be gone. He turned, walked away without knocking, and got into his car. His mind raced. 15 minutes later, he was back at the house he once shared with Sarah. Everything inside felt colder now. Not from the weather. From what he knew. Or worse, what he didn't. He poured himself a drink, something strong, and opened his laptop. There had to be something connecting all this. Some thread he hadn't pulled yet. He typed into the search bar, Michael Wren, Sarah Reed. Nothing immediate. He tried another combination, Michael Wren, Melissa Jameson. Still nothing concrete. A few old records. A defunct blog. A legal document. And then one obscure link led him to something unexpected, a court case from 2001. He clicked. Case number 01-34792, Wren vs. State. Charges: financial fraud, coercion, manipulation of a minor, conspiracy to defraud foster care funds. Plaintiff: State of New York. Defendant: Michael Wren. Witness: Sarah Reed. Minor involved: Melissa Jameson. Thomas leaned forward. His drink sat untouched now. He read every word of the case summary. Michael Wren had been accused of running a small-scale operation where he manipulated vulnerable foster kids into helping him claim funds illegally. Melissa Jameson had been one of those minors, 16 at the time. A runaway. Angry. Easily controlled. Sarah had been the one to expose it. She testified. Risked everything. And because of her, Michael Wren had been sentenced to 18 months. It all made sense now. Sarah had tried to save the girl. Melissa, had run away, disappeared. Years later, she returned. Not for love. Not for Thomas. For revenge. Thomas stood up so suddenly the chair behind him toppled over. He rushed back to the study and yanked open the drawer. Sure enough, taped underneath was another envelope. The last one he hadn't opened yet. The handwriting was Sarah's, but Messier. As if written in a rush. Or in pain. Thomas. You should know the truth now. I imagine you've seen the photo. I imagine you've put some of it together. But not all. Not yet. Yes, I knew who she was. Yes, I knew what she wanted. And yes, I let her into our lives. Not because I wanted to punish you. But because I wanted to watch her make the same choice I once did. I loved someone once who wasn't who he claimed to be. His name was Michael. He was charming, brilliant, and dangerous. He convinced me I was nothing without him. That everyone else was the enemy. Even Melissa. I was so blinded by what I thought was love, I nearly destroyed everything. I ignored the girl right in front of me, begging to be saved. And by the time I realized it, she was gone. He hurt her. I know that now. He used her, like he used me. But Melissa didn't vanish. She reinvented herself. Marissa. I saw her the first time you brought her home. And my heart stopped. Not from rage. Not even from fear. From guilt. Because I had failed her once. And now, here she was, wrapped around the man who once promised to love me forever. I knew what was coming. So I let it. But this time, I watched. And this time, I made sure it ended differently. You'll find the last piece at Michael's old cabin. You know the one. If you ever bothered to listen to my stories. You'll know what to do when you get there. Sarah. The cabin. Thomas hadn't thought about it in years. A rustic old place on the edge of Pine Hollow Woods. Sarah had talked about it once or twice, always with a strange tone. Like a memory that held too much weight. He had to go. He grabbed his keys and coat and drove. The roads were slick, the sky a deep shade of purple-gray, like it hadn't decided whether to sleep or storm. By the time he reached the cabin, the sun had vanished completely. He stepped out, flashlight in hand. The cabin door creaked as it opened. Dust floated in the beam of his light. The air smelled like mildew and old secrets. Everything inside was covered in white sheets. Until he saw it. A box. Sitting in the center of the room, wrapped in brown paper. His name scribbled across the top. He opened it slowly. Inside were a stack of photos. A cassette tape. A worn leather wallet. And a letter. The photos came first. Blurry, black and white, clearly taken with an old camera. Some were of Sarah. Younger. Laughing. Some were of Michael. And some were of Melissa. Not Marissa. Younger. Thin. Eyes guarded. The images told a silent story. One of manipulation. One of pain. One of a man who had used his position of trust to hurt the very people he was meant to protect. The cassette tape had a label, 1999. She tells everything. Thomas found a battery-powered recorder in the box. He slid the tape in, pressed play. A young girl's voice. Trembling. But clear. He told me no one would believe me. He said Sarah would hate me. That she already did. That I was just another kid she was stuck with. He made me lie. He made me do things. He said if I told anyone, I'd end up dead or locked away. But Sarah wasn't like that. She believed me. She didn't yell. She just held me. Then the trial happened. And I ran. I was scared. I thought if I stayed, he'd come after me again. Then silence. Then one last line. I wonder if she ever forgave me for leaving. Thomas sat frozen. Everything he thought he knew was upside down. Sarah hadn't just been betrayed. She had sacrificed. Fought. Loved. And Melissa hadn't come back to hurt her. She'd come back, to test her. To see if forgiveness was real. If healing was possible. And somehow, in her final act, Sarah had given it. Thomas couldn't take his eyes off the phone screen. The words pulsed in his mind like an alarm bell. He found me. Michael. He's alive. He stared out at the wet road in front of him, parked at the side of a forest road just outside the cabin where he had found the tape, the photos, and Sarah's final letter. A bitter wind rattled the car windows. His heart beat wildly. He's alive. But that couldn't be possible. The court records said Michael Wren had been released from prison in 2003. There had been no mention of him after that, no address, no employment history, nothing. Sarah herself had spoken of him as if he were gone. Not dead, necessarily, but finished. A ghost. Now he was back. And apparently, he had found Marissa. Or Melissa. He still didn't know what to call her anymore. He took a breath and tapped his phone. Thomas, where are you? Are you safe? Marissa, no. I don't know. I think he's watching me. Thomas, where are you right now? Marissa, my apartment. But I'm leaving. I packed a bag. I'll be at the Westgate Motel in an hour. Room 6. Come alone. Thomas hesitated. Something in him screamed not to go. Not yet. But another part, the part that couldn't stop imagining Sarah's face when she forgave her, told him he had to. For answers. For closure. For the truth. He started the engine and turned back toward town. The Westgate Motel sat on the edge of the city, just off an abandoned highway loop. The neon sign outside buzzed like an old wound that wouldn't heal. A flickering vacancy sign cast red light onto the cracked pavement. Thomas pulled into the lot and parked in the back, where the camera wouldn't catch his plate. Instinct, maybe. Or paranoia. Room SXS curtains were drawn. A dim light flickered behind them. He knocked once. Then twice. The door opened a crack. Marissa's face appeared, shadowed by the warm, yellow glow behind her. She looked tired, older than she had weeks ago. Her eyes were wide, alert, scared. Come in. Quickly, she said. He entered. The room smelled like cheap detergent and nervous sweat. A duffel bag sat by the bed. On the small table by the window, there were 2 coffee cups, a half-eaten sandwich, and a handgun. Thomas's eyes locked on the weapon. You expecting him to knock? He asked. She didn't smile. He won't knock. He never did. She sat on the edge of the bed, arms wrapped around herself. I didn't know if you'd come, she said softly. You told me he's alive, Thomas said, voice steady. I need more than that. She nodded. I'll tell you everything. But you need to listen. And you need to believe me. I've done a lot of listening lately. Not a lot of trusting. She looked away. I get that, she said. Flashback, Marissa's story begins. I left when I was 16 because I thought Michael was coming for me. After Sarah testified, I was taken into protective custody, but I ran. I didn't believe I was safe. She rubbed her arms like she could still feel the fear. I spent years looking over my shoulder. I changed my name. Cut my hair. Got tattoos. Moved to 3 different states. Thomas listened quietly. I eventually built something, a fake life. I even started to believe it. But it was always temporary. Because I knew, he wasn't done. She paused. Then I saw Sarah's name on a university faculty listing 3 years ago. She was teaching creative writing. I hadn't seen her name in over a decade. And something in me cracked. That's when you came back? Thomas asked. She nodded. I told myself it was to make peace. To say sorry. But it wasn't. She looked up, eyes glassy. I wanted to know if she'd forgiven me. And had she? He asked. She didn't say the words, she whispered. But she made tea. She let me sit in her kitchen. She asked if I was happy. I started crying. She handed me a tissue and said, "You don't need to be punished to be forgiven." Thomas's throat tightened. He could see it. Sarah, calm, measured, merciful. She knew about you and me, he said. Marissa nodded. She knew before you did. She said love wasn't ownership. That if I was here for revenge, I'd already lost. And were you? Marissa was silent. Then, no. Not when I saw her. I couldn't be. Michael returns. I hadn't seen Michael in over 20 years. Not a word. Not a trace. I thought he'd changed his name too, or maybe finally done something bad enough to disappear for good. She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, and showed Thomas the screen. A blurry surveillance photo. A man standing outside her apartment building. Long coat. Balding. Slight hunch. Unmistakably him. How did you get this? I installed a motion camera last year after someone broke into my car, she said. He stood there for 15 minutes. Just looking up. When was this? 2 days after Sarah's funeral. Thomas's blood ran cold. Have you talked to him? She shook her head. But I got a letter. She pulled a crumpled envelope from her bag and handed it to him. Inside, one line in spidery cursive. You owe me a life. It's time to pay up. No name. No return address. But they both knew who it was from. A web of secrets. Thomas sat down, trying to process everything. Why now? He muttered. Why after all this time? Marissa's voice was barely above a whisper. Because we brought it all back. Sarah. You. Me. And the will, it didn't just leave you empty. He looked up. It left him empty. She reached into her bag and pulled out a second envelope. Sarah didn't just leave you a letter. She left me one too. After the funeral, Holloway gave this to me. Thomas took it and opened it slowly. Melissa. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And so is the illusion. You always wanted to believe that he didn't shape you. That you escaped. But we both know the truth. Part of you is still tied to him. That's why you came back. He'll come for you now. Not because he wants you. Because he needs to destroy the version of you that survived. But remember this, you're not a victim anymore. And I didn't leave you empty. There's something I never told anyone. Not even Thomas. But it's time. Under the floorboards of the old shed at the cabin, there's a box. Inside is a file I kept hidden for years. Police records. Names. Evidence. The only thing that ever scared him. Don't run. Expose him. You owe it to yourself. Sarah. Thomas's hand trembled. He hadn't checked the shed. I have to go back, he said. Tonight. No, Marissa said quickly. Not tonight. Not alone. He looked at her. She stepped closer. We go together. The cold wrapped around them like a second skin. The forest was dead silent, as if it too were holding its breath. Michael Wren stood 10 feet away from them, partly cloaked by the trees, his face obscured by the shadows, but his voice was unmistakable. Looking for something? Thomas instinctively stepped in front of Marissa, shielding her without even thinking. The adrenaline kicked in instantly, muscles tightening, heart pounding in his ears. Michael took a slow step forward. He wore a dark coat, worn at the cuffs, and a strange calmness on his face, as if this was all rehearsed. As if he'd been waiting for this moment for a very, very long time. I see she brought you, Michael said, eyeing Thomas with an unnerving half-smile. You don't know half of what's going on, do you? I know enough, Thomas replied, voice cold. Michael's gaze flicked to Marissa, no, to Melissa. And you, he murmured, you should have stayed gone. She didn't flinch. "You're the one who should have stayed buried." For a beat, no one moved. The wind picked up slightly, brushing dead leaves across the cabin steps behind them. Thomas narrowed his eyes. Why now? Why follow her after all these years? What do you want? Michael's expression darkened. Justice. Thomas took a step forward. Or revenge? Michael said nothing. Just smiled. Depends who you ask. And with that, he turned and disappeared back into the trees, the crunch of leaves trailing him briefly before silence swallowed the woods again. They stood there for a long moment. Marissa exhaled shakily. He's not finished. No, Thomas said. But neither are we. They turned and entered the shed. Inside the shed, the hidden box. The shed hadn't changed. Dust clung to the wooden walls. Rusted tools hung untouched. A lantern rested on the shelf, Sarah's old camping gear. Thomas grabbed it, flicked it on, and the small space glowed with a weak amber light. They scanned the floor. There, Marissa said, pointing. In the far corner, behind stacked crates, part of the floorboards had been pried up before. Light scratches and loosened nails told the story. Thomas knelt and wedged his fingers beneath the wood. It groaned as it came free. And underneath, wrapped in layers of cloth, plastic, and tape, was the box. He lifted it carefully. It was heavier than expected. A small, steel container, Sarah's handwriting marked the top, for when the past catches up. He opened it. Inside, files, photographs, recordings. Old court transcripts. Police statements. And something else, a small, sealed envelope labeled. To be opened if Michael returns. Thomas handed it to Marissa. Her hands shook as she peeled it open. Sarah's final message. Melissa. If he's back, it means he's still dangerous. Not because of what he can do to you physically, but what he knows. What he's hidden. Michael didn't just abuse and manipulate. He recorded everything. The things he made you say, the lies he forced you to spread, the traps he laid for others. Those tapes are real. And they're out there. He thinks he has power because he thinks he's holding secrets. But the truth is stronger. That file contains the names of 3 other women. They were never called to testify. They were threatened. One of them, her name is Natalie Jennings, kept copies. She lives in Kansas now, under a new identity. You must find her. Tell her you're ready to speak. When you stand together, the story becomes undeniable. He will come for you again. But this time, he won't find a scared girl. He'll find a witness. Burn this letter after reading. S. Marissa pressed the page to her chest. I remember her, she said softly. Natalie. She was only 15. Thomas flipped through the files. There were names, timelines, documents with entire paragraphs blacked out. Sarah was building this case in secret the whole time, he murmured. Even as she was dying. She knew he'd come back, Marissa whispered. And she prepared everything. For me. Thomas looked up at her. For all of you. She nodded. Then her face hardened. We need to find Natalie. We will, Thomas said. But we can't go back tonight. He's still out there. Suddenly, a sound broke through the quiet, a shuffling outside the shed. Then a soft creak on the porch steps. Marissa grabbed the lantern and doused it. They were instantly swallowed by the dark. Thomas motioned for silence. He reached into his coat for the pistol Marissa had given him earlier. Footsteps. Getting closer. Then a voice, soft, feminine. Hello? Hello, is someone there? They froze. The door creaked open. A young woman stepped in, flashlight in hand. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Dark hoodie, jeans, backpack. Her eyes scanned the darkness. "I'm looking for Melissa," she said. Marissa stepped forward cautiously. "Who are you?" "My name is Natalie," she said. "I got a message. From someone named Sarah. Months ago." Truth, finally shared. They sat inside the cabin, the door locked, fireplace lit. Thomas boiled water for tea. Natalie sat with her knees drawn up to her chest. "I wasn't going to come," she said. "But then I saw something, or someone, outside my work 3 nights ago. I recognized him. Michael." Thomas exchanged a look with Marissa. Natalie continued, "I've been carrying these tapes for years. I didn't know what to do with them. The police wouldn't take them. I figured no one would believe me. Until Sarah wrote me. Told me if she ever died, you'd come looking." She pulled out a pouch. Inside were 3 mini cassette tapes. One of them was labeled, "Melissa, July 1997. Marissa's hand trembled as she picked it up. "I don't even remember what's on it," she whispered. Thomas gently set it aside. "You don't have to remember it," he said. "We'll listen when you're ready." But Marissa shook her head. "No. I need to know." She slid the tape into a recorder. The room filled with a ghostly version of her own voice, young, afraid, trying to sound calm. "He told me what to say. If I didn't, he said it'd be worse. He said I had to pretend I saw Sarah do something bad. That it was her, not him. I didn't know what to say. I just wanted to leave. He kept locking the door. He said if I talked, no one would believe me." Marissa stopped the tape. Tears streaked silently down her face. "I was just a child," she whispered. "He made me lie." Natalie reached over and took her hand. "Me too." Thomas looked at them both, and in that moment, he knew. The story wasn't about Sarah anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about truth. And bringing that truth to light. The ringing had stopped. But the silence afterward was louder than ever. Thomas stood motionless, phone still pressed to his ear. The old receiver's buzz hummed faintly, like a warning that hadn't finished yet. Marissa whispered, "What did he say?" Thomas lowered the phone. "He knows we're here." Natalie stood, her voice trembling. "He's watching?" Thomas locked the door, then the windows. "No. Not anymore. If he wanted to hurt us, he would have done it already. This is a game to him." Marissa clenched her jaw. "Then we changed the rules." For the next hour, they prepared, packing files, copying tapes, scanning documents with Thomas's portable device, sending everything to encrypted email addresses and cloud backups. There would be no single place for this story to die. They were going to bring Michael Wren down. Not just for Sarah. Not just for Melissa. But for every name written in that box, women and girls who'd never been heard. Flashback, Melissa's breaking point, 10 years ago. The rain was falling hard. Melissa stood in a bus shelter, soaked to the bone, holding a single backpack. Her lip was swollen, her ribs bruised. She had finally run. She remembered Sarah's voice over the payphone. "Come to me. I'll make sure you're safe. I swear it." Sarah had never questioned her. Never asked for proof. Just sent money, gave her an address, and said, "Get on the next bus." Melissa stayed with her for months. She cooked, cleaned, tried to feel normal. But every night she'd wake up screaming. The fear didn't fade, only curled tighter around her soul. Sarah never pushed. But one morning, Melissa found a note taped to the fridge. 4 words. "When you're ready, S." And it was signed not with a heart, but a feather. Sarah always said feathers were signs of freedom. Present day, the newsroom. 3 days later, they stood outside the building that housed the Eastwood Chronicle, the last independent paper in town. The others had turned down the story or ignored their calls. But the Chronicle's lead reporter, Claire Jennings, had listened. Claire was Natalie's cousin, and she'd always believed her. Now she was ready to make the whole thing public. Claire sat across the table in the newsroom, reviewing files and playing audio. Her face went pale. This is enough to launch an investigation," she whispered. "These names, these tapes." Thomas said quietly, "It's more than a story. It's a reckoning." Claire nodded. "I'll print this. But once I do, you won't be safe. Especially you, Melissa." "I'm not going back into hiding," she said. "He's hidden long enough." Claire looked at her. "Okay. I'm doing a full exposé. But we'll also reach out to law enforcement. You'll need to testify. Natalie, too." Natalie glanced at Melissa, took her hand, and nodded. "We will." Claire leaned back, breath trembling. "You've just started something unstoppable." The article drops. 3 days later, the story hit the front page. Voices from the shadows, the hidden victims of Michael Wren. By noon, it had gone viral. By nightfall, national networks picked it up. Podcasts. Blogs. Survivor groups. Everyone was talking about it. Michael Wren's photo was everywhere. Melissa's anonymous quote appeared under every headline. "He taught me fear. She taught me how to speak. I choose her voice now." Backlash and shadows. But the day after, something changed. The front tire of Thomas's car was slashed. An anonymous message appeared in Marissa's inbox. "Stories can burn. So can people." And someone had posted an old photo of Melissa, when she was just 15, on an obscure online forum. The caption was filled with lies. She stared at it, fingers shaking. "They're trying to ruin me," she whispered. "They're scared of you," Natalie said. "That's different." But the next night, someone set fire to the shed behind Sarah's cabin. It went up in flames. They arrived too late to save anything left inside. Thomas clenched his fists as he watched the last of the ashes float upward. "That was their last hiding place," he said. "Now they're exposed. The trial begins." Within weeks, enough evidence was collected. Natalie agreed to testify. So did 2 other women, whose names had appeared in Sarah's file. Each had been silenced once, but no more. Michael Wren was arrested in a public confrontation outside a grocery store, his face caught on a dozen phone cameras. When the footage hit the news, the world saw him. The predator no longer in control, being led away in cuffs. The trial began 3 months later. Melissa sat across the courtroom from him, flanked by Thomas and Natalie. She took the stand last. The room went still. And then she spoke. She told everything. Her real name. What Michael did. How he manipulated the system. How Sarah saved her. How she'd lived hidden. And how she chose, finally, not to be silent. The courtroom didn't breathe for almost 10 minutes. At the end, Michael didn't look at her. Not once. But as she stepped down, she whispered, not for him, but for herself. "I forgive the girl I was. And I fight for the woman I've become." Epilogue, the final will. After the verdict, Thomas went through the rest of Sarah's box, still kept in a safety deposit vault. He found something unexpected. A second copy of her will. One even her lawyer didn't know about. It included a short letter. "Thomas. If you're reading this, you did the impossible. You brought her back. I knew she would need you. There's one last thing you deserve to know. The cabin? It's yours. I left it out of the first will for a reason. You always said it felt like home. Now it is. And if she chooses to stay, then maybe both of you can make it into something good again. Love always. Sarah. Thomas stood on the cabin porch weeks later, looking out over the forest. Marissa joined him, a cup of tea in her hands. I think she always knew how this would end, Marissa said. Not an ending, Thomas said. A beginning. They stood in silence. The past buried behind them. The truth walking freely now. And ahead, a quiet kind of peace. Final message. This story isn't just about darkness. It's about the courage to speak when no one wants to listen. About choosing to rebuild when your world has burned. And about honoring those who gave you the strength to stand at all. Sarah never got to see justice. But she made it possible.